Introduction to AWS Amplify REST API. AWS Amplify is a development platform that helps you build scalable mobile and web applications. And one of its key features is the REST API, which allows you to interact with your backend services. In this tutorial, we will explore the tips and best practices for using AWS Amplify REST API. Setting up AWS Amplify. To get started with AWS Amplify, you need to set up an AWS account and install the Amplify CLI. Once you have the CLI installed, you can create a new Amplify project and initialize the REST API. Defining REST API endpoints. The next step is to define your REST API endpoints. You can do this by creating a new file in the Amplify backend.py directory and defining your endpoints using the API Gateway REST API. For example, you can define a GET endpoint to retrieve a list of items, a POST endpoint to create a new item, and a PUT endpoint to update an existing item. Handling API requests and responses. When handling API requests and responses, it is essential to use the correct HTTP methods and status codes. For example, when creating a new item, you should use the POST method and return a 201 status code to indicate that the item was created successfully. You should also use the correct content type and headers to ensure that the client can understand the response. Implementing authentication and authorization. Security is a critical aspect of any REST API, and AWS Amplify provides built-in support for authentication and authorization. You can use AWS Cognito to authenticate users and authorize access to your API endpoints. For example, you can use the Cognito user pool to authenticate users and the Cognito identity pool to authorize access to your API endpoints. Best practices for using AWS Amplify REST API. To get the most out of AWS Amplify REST API, follow these best practices. Use meaningful endpoint names and descriptions to make it easy for clients to understand your API. Use the correct HTTP methods and status codes to ensure that clients can understand your API. Responses. Implement authentication and authorization to secure your API endpoints. Use API keys and usage plans to control access to your API endpoints and monitor usage. Conclusion. In conclusion, AWS Amplify REST API is a powerful tool for building scalable and secure backend services. By following the tips and best practices outlined in this tutorial, you can create a well-designed and well-implemented REST API that meets the needs of your clients. Remember to use meaningful endpoint names and descriptions. Implement authentication and authorization, and use API keys and usage plans to control access to your API endpoints.